Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show, The Future of Recruiting and How COVID-19 is Transforming Hiring. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Erin Scruggs, and I'm the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition here at LinkedIn. I want to start with the usual housekeeping and remind you guys of a few things. First, the show is being recorded, so you can share it and check it out later. Two, please share your questions. There will be Q&A at the end of the event, so remember to share questions and comments and even stories you have that are relevant to the topics we'll be talking about. And then third, tag us at LinkedIn and use hashtag Future of Recruiting. We want to hear your thoughts. So we're here today for a conversation about the future of recruiting, which in a normal year implies that we'll be looking only forward. Today may be a little bit different, as the future has undoubtedly been shaped by the past 9 months of 2020. And those 9 months are sort of in real time shaping our future as talent acquisition professionals. So I want to start by just sort of setting the stage of where we are today. So you are likely working with teams that are leaner. Your company may have bigger and constantly shifting hiring needs as they adapt to the swings in the economy and the forecasts for the future. The business goals are very complex and constantly evolving. And in talent, you're poised to take on a bigger role in the company than before. So LinkedIn recently released its Future of Recruiting report, which is 6 predictions based on input from thousands of your peers from LinkedIn data and interviews with global talent leaders. Today, we're going to chat through 2 of those predictions, and we'll talk about the imperative of hiring diverse teams, and then we'll talk about the evolution of talent management and internal mobility. So our guests today, our guests are talent leaders from ViacomCBS, from Infosys, and from ARM. And they will share how they're preparing for hiring in 2021. So jumping into it. So global teams are waking up to the fact that diversity is not an act of activism. It is a business imperative. So building teams with groups that represent the population means that you build products that serve the people you build them for. Companies who stay homogenous fall behind, and as executives wake up to that fact, diversity is becoming a key part of all recruiting strategies. In fact, our survey of talent professionals around the world shows that diversity will be critical to the future of recruiting at every organization. This was true for 84% of talent professionals surveyed in the US. In Europe and the Middle East, 76% of talent professionals, and in Asia Pacific, 73% of talent professionals. So our first guest to talk about this topic is Anastacia Flores. She oversees talent acquisition for ViacomCBS, streaming and tech. Anastacia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's jump into this conversation on diversity.
Let's do it.
So in hiring, we've shifted language over the last few years to encourage our hiring leaders to bring in talent who are culture adds instead of culture fits. And recruiting is sort of laser focused on creating these candidate pools that represent diverse backgrounds and experiences and skill sets that contribute to a company rather than conforming to it. So can you talk a little bit about the conscious decision to select talent that isn't incredibly similar to the team they're joining? And then a little bit about what does a hiring team have to believe to select talent that doesn't feel exactly like everyone else?
Absolutely. So I think there's a few things here that you highlighted around, unconscious bias. We focus on conscious inclusion at ViacomCBS, and I'm from the legacy CBS Interactive side, and that's been a really important part of our company and culture. Additionally, we talk a lot about the missing voice. So who is on your team, who isn't on your team, it's not the same for everybody. And so being able to have those conversations and empower the recruiting team to know where to ask questions, where to lean in, where to dig, what to do, and how to partner really with those hiring managers, not just go in and expect that the hiring managers know exactly what's going on, but really to be able to have a dialogue, dig in, be aware of those unconscious biases and have conversations about them so that you are ensuring that you're bringing the best qualified, diverse talent to those hiring leaders.
Yeah, I think I always say I'm a collection of sound bites, and so I love the the distinction of conscious inclusion. Can you unpack that and tell me a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. So instead of just being aware of what those unconscious biases are and moving on, it's being aware of them and then being able to discuss them and say where some of those other levels of diversity can really lean in and can really be a value add and a culture add to your team. And so I always have used my team as an example. Up until recently, we were pretty historically female. And so as we were talking about bringing some new folks onto the team, it was the missing voice of we didn't have men. We had more folks that were white instead of mixed genders or people of color. And so ensuring that my team is really digging into those things. And if there are biases that they are bringing up, we're talking about them, we're aware of them, and we're making sure that it's not driving us away from making a decision, that we are empowering the teams to identify the best fit candidate for the role.
It's interesting because when we talk about diversity and unconscious bias, I think that has become something that everyone is aware of what that means, or the majority of people are aware of what that means. But I do think that there is a journey that every organization takes to sort of accept the reality that there is unconscious bias and to take the steps that they need to through their own education to combat that bias. Kind of where are you guys on your journey, and sort of what do you see as the next steps that you have to take to get to utopia, which we may stay far away from, but we want to get closer to.
Utopia is that goal, right? I don't know that anybody has found it. If you have, please call me, let me know. I would love to hear more about it. But we have a unique thing happening here at ViacomCBS, in that we're multiple companies coming together. So like I said, I'm from the legacy CBS Interactive side. We have Viacom folks, we have CBS folks. And so we're all coming together with great ideas and learning and sharing. And so, like I said, CBS Interactive has had conscious inclusion training. We are now looking at making sure that all of our TA team has unconscious bias training and diversity training, and we're empowering them with how they talk to hiring managers. What are those difficult conversations? Where to dig in? How to identify the missing voice? What are the questions to ask? So that's something that we're focused on right now. We're also expanding out the training for hiring managers and interviewers to include those biases and that unconscious inclusion awareness, so that they have the same level of knowledge that our recruiters do and really can drive forward some of those successes. Another thing is data. I'm a big data nerd. My team will probably attest to it. And being able to look at the data and see where things are working and where there are hiccups and where you can lean in, and understanding attract, select, retain. That's something that we've been talking about a lot as we're coming together as one TA team. And where are the pockets within that of things that we need to do differently, and how can we do them? So I think training is big, data is big, talking about it is big, but then supporting your employees so that they know that this is important. It's not just one tiny little team that's doing it. It's throughout the company and throughout the culture. It's interwoven in all that we do.
I love that. And I think, it's interesting as you evolve as a company and making sure that we're doing the right things to actually achieve the results. For us, it has been really important to treat it like a business imperative, something that we measure every quarter, that we have goals on, that we have accountability on. And then I think a few years ago, it might have been, hey, talent acquisition, bring us the talent, bring us diverse talent and diversify the organization. And when we weren't focusing on sort of the retention piece, the growing talent internally and making sure that people felt invested, it became a challenge because we were bringing people in and then they weren't feeling that sense of belonging. And so what I think is really interesting, and you and I've talked about this before, is this idea of, if it is not a top-down imperative, and if everyone isn't talking about it, focusing on it, measuring on it, and communicating, it's really hard to win. So talk to me a little bit about what you measure and sort of the cadence with which you measure, and how you've gotten your executives bought into really heavily leaning into this work.
Yeah, so this is all in process right now as we're continuing to come together as one company, the broader ViacomCBS. We have CBS Interactive, we have Viacom, we have CBS, we have Pluto TV, Paramount. All of us are coming together. And so we're just starting to get to the point where all of our leaders are on the same page with that goal, with that drive, and with those expectations. But it is a conversation piece. I think that the biggest thing to mention is that it's not just being talked about at the top, it's being talked about at the bottom and in the middle, and that everybody has that same level, right? And so by training our recruiters with this information, by training our hiring managers with this information, and then soon coming from our leadership team, what are those goals? What are those expectations? We can all kind of identify what's our role, how do we fill in, how do we move the needle, and really how do we support each other to have those hard conversations and drive towards those successes. So right now we're getting to identifying what those goals are and what that data is and where do we need to be. But at the end of the day, we're talking about it. We're not shying away from it, and we're pushing to determine, what we want to be and where we want to go. And I think that's a really great start as we bring our companies together.
I think that's really interesting. And that idea of the middle really resonates with me because when you have the top very much bought in, and then you've got a talent organization that's very bought in, that's great, but it's not enough. And I think you've got to get to all of those middles. And so what I think I'm realizing more and more every day is that a lot of success at building diverse teams centers on education and sort of myth busting. So at LinkedIn, that has meant like, hey, how do we rally every person who touches hiring around the truth that diverse teams win? And it's also meant this deliberate and constant debunking of the idea of like, there aren't any, or that talent does not exist, or the skill set doesn't exist in underrepresented groups. Right. And so we have to show managers what's possible. And then we have to build up, this master story of here are teams that have had success and here are managers that are doing it well, and sort of showcase what success looks like. Have you had any success in, really educating that middle and really kind of driving them to get the clarity based on other things that are happening in the org?
Yeah, we're getting there. Like I said, or like you said, we both said, we're not at utopia, right? But there are some teams that are a little bit more aware and bought in, and they know that some of the industries that they're in or the roles that they're hiring for historically have challenges. And so I think they are a little bit more ready to dive in and be gung-ho. They're coming to us asking, what are our diversity partners? How can we work with them? What does that look like? We've also had a ton of success with our internship program. We have a year-round internship program that has year over year for the last 4 years become more diverse, both in gender and race and ethnicity, which is amazing because that's a funnel into the company. And so talking to those hiring managers and giving them the data to say, look, you're looking for interns, you're talking to us about this missing voice of whomever on the team. Here's a great way. We have a partner here or a partner there. Let's start with some interns coming in, because if we are able to convert them, they're going to be here and they're going to grow. So it's being able to share those things, identifying who your partners are, and really working with them to get more and more people involved, and then expanding out from there. But using those diversity partners, using that internship program, using the leaders that are on the same page as you and the TA team to talk about it, push it forward, identify the gaps, come up with creative solutions.
I love that. Can you talk to me a little bit about diversity partners and what role they play? Because I think we're probably a little early on our partnership journey. So what role do they play, and what's your expectation for what they bring to your organization?
It totally depends. So we have had a number of diversity partners where we've had some great events, and we've sent very targeted, specific invites to those events. And then we've had guest speakers, and, we've talked to them about open jobs. In the times of COVID, that's a little bit different. Yeah. So we've shifted a little bit more to ensuring that we're posting jobs across as many diversity partners as we can, that we are getting access to any resume books, that we're using that in our sourcing efforts, and that we are paying attention again to that missing voice and knowing that it's not one size fits all. So just because this team over here has a ton of women doesn't mean that the team that they partner with doesn't need women. So, who needs which kind of partner, and what lever do we need to pull? Is an event the right way to go? Is it sourcing through some of these resume books? Is it just opening a dialogue to see where we can go in the future? Is it focusing on those interns to get them in from the bottom and convert them, coming in? And we have a whole list of diversity partners that we work with. We have a list of ones that we really want to work with. And then, as we come together as one company, we're talking to our partners on the Viacom and CBS side to ensure that we are learning from their best practices and the network that they have as well. So I don't think it's one size fits all, just like everything within diversity, but being able to identify what are those little things that we need and how does it vary team to team and how can we partner with them and our external partners to really bring those successes on board.
I love that. And I wonder, I suspect I know the answer to this question, but are you seeing pockets of success in organizations that have a heavier appetite versus ones that are maybe not as evolved and aren't moving as quickly to meet their diversity goals?
So I haven't dug in a ton on the data, but I would suspect that as well. But there's also this nuance of how hiring has changed this year and hiring numbers. For us, with the streaming and tech side, we have been moving and grooving the whole year because everybody is stuck at home. They want to stream, from their television. So
we're grateful for you.
Well. Yes, we're happy to help. That's worked out well for us. But then for other parts of the business that haven't been hiring as much, they haven't been able to move that needle on some of those diversity efforts because they haven't been bringing in as many interns or they haven't been, hiring as many folks. And so I think we are going to see that hopefully pick up as things move and improve with COVID. But for now, I don't have the specifics on the data.
Yep.
It's a different year, and the merger brings everything into a different light as well.
So you've had 2020 times two with also going through a merger. Yeah. So, you've talked a little bit about interns. We have intern program, which is fairly diverse. We have an apprenticeship program where we take people in one career who are looking to make a career transition, and we have a retraining program. And we did that for a couple of years. But what we heard loud and clear from our employees is that is great that we're growing talent, but that's slow, right? They're not seeing people in leadership soon enough. And so we got very, very intentional at the executive level. How do we make sure that there is equal representation so people from underrepresented groups see people who look like themselves in leadership? How do you think about the difference in strategy for an executive level hire versus an intern hire? And are you equally focused on all levels?
It's challenging, especially depending upon how the org has their hiring set up. And so again, with our merger, Viacom and CBS have had historically an executive hiring team. We at CBS Interactive haven't had that. And so our hiring processes have been a little bit different. The strategy, I think, is definitely different because you're looking potentially at fewer roles at those executive levels. And so they are more strategic, they are more visible. And so you really need to make sure that you are putting forth a diverse group of folks. And at the end of the day, bringing in that best fit person for the role, for their background, for their experience, for their different companies, for the school or that they went to or they didn't go to. It's all of those things that come together. But at the executive level, I think it is definitely on steroids, I would say, because you have to focus so much more because there's fewer roles, right? On some of those mid-level positions where those people hopefully will get promoted up, you have more that you're filling. And while we still want to provide that diverse slate, and we do, it is perhaps a little bit less, I don't want to say less strategic, but it is there's a little bit more flex because you know that you're going to have more roles that you're filling.
And I'm conscious that we're almost out of time on this segment, and hopefully we can get to some more on the Q&A. But the last question I have, you mentioned, sort of bringing in a diverse slate of people. The NFL, I think a lot of people are aware, had the Rooney Rule that they use, and so many companies patterned their diversity strategy off of the Rooney Rule, which means that at least one in our world, it's one Black or Latino candidate interviews for every role. Are you guys using diverse slates? Do you see success because of that, or how do you think about Rooney Rule and diverse slates programs?
That's one of the things that we're working to kind of solidify as one TA team through the merger. And so, we are ensuring that we do have diverse slates, that women are represented so that people of color are represented throughout every single interview slate. So the hiring manager sees all of those candidates. We're working to finalize what those details are and where there are mandates for things. And some teams are wanting to make sure that there's more than that. Yeah. Because, just having one doesn't always help. And we've read some of the articles and seen some of the data. And so we're making sure that we're making this our own and that we're really pushing the envelope in the way that is best for us and giving all candidates an opportunity, but not just have that one to potentially check a box, but to have those people with diverse backgrounds and ideas, because at the end of the day, they're going to benefit. And that's really the philosophy that we're working to drive towards.
Yep, I love that. I think we agreed. So we started with Rooney Rule, and it was one, and it was a specific level of the funnel. Now we've pushed accountability down to like a farther level of the funnel of, hey, listen, we want to make sure it's a meaningful interview, deep in the funnel, late stage. And like you, we read the research of, if you interview one, the likelihood of people it's only 1 in 4 chance that you're going to get it every time. And so we've started to really kind of accelerate and push that Rooney Rule a little bit farther and be a lot more intentional. So love the thinking. Sometimes it's depressing that we are all doing the exact same thing instead of learning from each other. So just love this conversation and super helpful to hear what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
I do think we are supposed to switch gears now. So thank you so much for that conversation. That was great. And then we'll have you come back for Q&A from the group.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Awesome. And so next we're going to hear from a virtual recorded version of Ben Murphy-Ryan. Ben is the Senior Director of Global Talent Acquisition at the UK-based semiconductor arm. So if we could roll that video, that'd be great.
I think ultimately organizations won't be successful if we can't get the hiring community to think differently about the skills and capabilities that they are trying to acquire and the kind of the non-traditional routes to find them. The recruitment team can't just go off and do it on their own. They'll find good people, but they'll never be selected. They'll never go through the interview process. They'll never be taken all the way through if we haven't had that conversation. And if we don't take the time to position candidates differently with our hiring managers. Again, it's challenging, but I think it's part of the business partnering role that TA really shows value within organizations if we are able to do that. So it goes back into the trust and the relationship we have, and hopefully by using that, we'll be able to look at new sources of talent and opportunity for people. I think this year, from a EMEA perspective, it's the same as the global view on diversity being important. I think with the Black Lives Matter movement and the whole raising of the profile of diversity conversations within all organizations globally, it's given us a platform to really kind of consider this within our organization and others here. I think from a European perspective, the difference is in some ways we were observing events in the US and it challenges us to think differently, but actually one approach doesn't work the same in every organization, every country. Certainly diversity and considerations around protected characteristics, for example, vary greatly in Europe from country to country. And it makes it in some ways difficult to be able to apply the same approach across the whole region. So we have to be more nuanced. We have to listen to our employees in those countries, look at how they identify themselves, and that may be different between country to country, and ultimately look at how we can use data to help us in those conversations as well. I definitely see that difference between maybe some of the US-centric organizations and those which have a more global footprint, is that kind of the characteristics are similar, but there is usually some local nuance to them that we have to consider when we come up with our actions.
Thank you, Virtual Ben. So and I think that is a great transition from diversity into our next topic, which is talent development and internal mobility. And so, as we saw with the global trends on diversity hiring, internal mobility is also a huge growing topic. Since the onset of COVID-19, regions all over the world have seen an increase in internal mobility. In North America, 20% of talent leaders said that there was an increase. In Europe and the Middle East, 13%, and in Asia Pacific, 15%. So I want to introduce you to our next guest, Rajesh Ahuja. And Rajesh is the global head of talent acquisition at Infosys. Rajesh, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and very excited to be here.
Great. Well, so continuing our conversation with Anastacia on the candidate marketplace, let's talk about the internal piece of that marketplace. Particularly in large companies where it's impossible to have connective tissue across large business units, hiring managers still rely on recruiters to broker internal candidates for open roles. So I think the first thing I'd love to talk through is how can recruiters take ownership in facilitating and connecting the internal marketplace, in some cases ahead of the point of requisition?
Great question, Erin. I think there are a couple of assumptions or basic points which we need to consider or which we need to keep in mind. One is some of the best talent in the world is available in your own organization, and it's important to recognize that as a recruitment function. Second, organizations like ours or large organizations have spent a lot of time, effort, money on reskilling the talent. We all know, as every single Talent Insight report you would read, one thing which is common is the skill shortage or the shortage of skill, especially in the technology world and the new age technologies. And an organization like ours spend a lot of focus and focused effort on reskilling our own talent to new age skills. And in my view, it's time to combine the external and the internal marketplaces to one large talent pool for recruiters to look at, and be the real advisors to hiring managers about where is the best talent, who is the best person available for a particular position. If it's internal, then work on that process to facilitate that process for that internal talent to move into that position. And one myth which typically people live with, that if I fill a position internally, I'm not growing, or what would happen to the larger talent needs. Every position filled internally is also another position open to fill externally, because in any growing organization, you're constantly growing the overall talent pool, and it's important to recognize that as recruiters, that your job is not to fill or move one person from one position internally to another position. Your job is also to backfill the position where the first person came from. So I think it's very important for recruiters and the talent leaders to recognize the importance of internal talent pools and facilitate or remove friction between internal talent markets or marketplaces, and provide that one singular solution to the hiring manager community, rather than having two different lenses to look at these two marketplaces.
I love that, and I think it is so true what you say. Getting recruiters to realize that there's actually not I came from agency background, like staffing agency, so it was all about external. So it took me a long time to change my mindset, which is all a hiring manager wants is the best hire, and they actually don't care about source of hire. They don't care if it's a referral. They don't care if it's internal. They don't care if it's something that you sourced, after a 45-hour research project. They just want the best hire. And so I love your point there of like, how do we shift mindset of our recruiters to say, hey, your job is actually to find the best person and be agnostic around source. I think that's really interesting.
Absolutely. And I think hiring managers, heart and heart, also want that. And we all need to remember, for a critical position, an internal talent probably suits better, because you've already recruited the person, so you're not really recruiting the individual all over again. You have trained the person in many ways. They know the ways around your organization. They know they have the network already. So it's easier to sometimes hire for those difficult to hire and more critical positions by hiring internally, rather than running sometimes very long-winded searches or trying to look for candidates who do not exist probably. So it's better to take punt on somebody whom you know rather than not at times. But again, it's a balance, right? It's not one way or the other. The balance has to be that we're constantly looking at the external marketplace to attract the best in class talent for your organization, and not just trying to take a shortcut by saying, oh, I have posted this job internally, let's see what happens, and then and not give that option to the hiring manager. So recruiters have to really play that balancing act between what's the best possible solution for that particular position.
One of the things that was interesting this summer, sort of in the wake of COVID, I guess it was spring, we had one line of business that was rapidly accelerating. And then we had another line of business that people were a little hesitant to put budget there, or customers were a little hesitant to put budget there. And we needed to shift talent from one org to another. And so we actually used a lot of LinkedIn Talent Insights data to show, hey, we have these skills and capabilities internally, and we can shift from one organization to another, and the ramp time will be lower and the impact will be a lot greater. And I think it's bringing that data about our own talent org. We don't codify skills in Workday or in our our internal HR systems. So actually becoming a customer of LinkedIn and being able to show those insights was really helpful for us of proving our point of you actually don't want us to go hire 500 people externally. You want us to just move them.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a professional services organization, that's bread and butter, like, where what skills do you have inside the organization? What skills individuals are? We started on this journey with an interesting report from LinkedIn, Talent Insights, around how our employees are training themselves on the same skills which we are hiring from the external market, and it's important that recruiters have access to that really, really powerful insight at the business unit level or at the hiring manager level, where you're able to go and show a very, very matter of fact, concrete data to say, this is what exists in the marketplace. This is the market we are really going and hunting in, and this is what is available internally. What do you think is the better solution, right? And I would say 9 out of 10 times, it's not that difficult for people to make that decision, either which ways, right? But it's once you have that candid, data-driven conversation, it's a far easier path from there on.
Great. I think it's when you think about changing hearts and minds to enact change, right? I think another myth is that it is taboo somehow to poach internally, and that we're creating competition between teams, and that isn't going to feel good, and some teams are going to overpay. I do think this internal movement is becoming more of the norm, with COVID reducing budgets to hire new employees. But how can TA teams place themselves in this advocacy role to help managers see potential opportunities out there? And then how does TA educate on the impact of internal optionality on employee retention? So I think people knowing that they have trajectory and optionality in the org is so important to our employees. How do we educate managers on the value proposition there?
One thing that TA professionals or TA leaders or each recruiter has done beautifully in the last few years is to remove friction between candidates, external candidates, and the organizations, right? We make it easy for our jobs to be available to them. We make it easy for them to apply. We make it easy for them to get interviewed, and so on and so forth, right? And I think we need to use exactly the same principle internally also, that we need to look at our employees as with the same lens as we look at candidates, and remove that friction between how an internal employee can also apply for an opportunity with the same ease, with the same comfort of what an external candidate gets. Be it in terms of the information available to them, be it in terms of how either the recruitment or the hiring managers sell them the job, woo them a little bit to join the organization. And second point, I think it's very important for especially the talent recruitment and talent professionals to work hand in hand with the HR organization and not come across as a conflict to the traditional talent management activities, be it in terms of promotions, be it in terms of succession planning, be it in terms of career movements, and whatever else is planned on a regular basis for individuals. So these programs need to complement each other rather than be at conflict. But the important point is for an employee, they should come across as seamless and with very little friction in the process. At the bigger picture, if I take a step back, I think we all also need to recognize and educate our hiring managers that the concept of careers is changing and has changed in the last few years, and is changing at a very rapid pace, right? We're no longer talking about long periods of staying in a single job or a single role. People are millennials, Gen Z. I think it's very well documented. People are looking for experiences. People are looking for project work. People are looking to move from one gig to another within the organization. And as fast as we recognize that, we would be able to keep that talent within the four boundaries of our organization, rather than lose them to an interesting gig outside or an interesting project outside. All good companies have enough of those gigs and projects available to provide to your own employees. So I think it's very important to recognize that careers are no longer long-term, long durations, hierarchical in nature. It's about Here and now, it's about projects, it's about faster movement and frictionless movements.
I think that's so interesting. I've heard our chief business officer, Dan Shapiro, he's talked a bit about, the idea of that 40-year career at Pepsi or at 3M. It's a thing of the past, but can we swing that pendulum back? I think you pose a really interesting question. Assuming we can overcome some of the pay compression issues that happen when you stay somewhere for a while, but can you move the pendulum back because people see really interesting work and continued learning and stretching and growing in their own organizations? And to enable that for people, we have to be able to bet on our internal folks that we've already brought on board, bet that they can transfer their skills from one project to another. I think that's fascinating. And I'm eager for the tools, the tech and tools that enable that. I'm hopeful that we build them, but I do think there's some technology.
And my view is probably there would not be a tool, right? There would not be a
correct.
It would be the organizations or talent leaders' ability to orchestrate a set of tools, internal as well as external tools, to get what you really are aiming out of. And as much as the talent world is moving rapidly, the talent tech world is also moving very rapidly. So I think we need to recognize that we need to experiment with few before we are able to decide what's right for the organization and work with that.
Agreed. Well, I think marrying the two topics of today. So I remember very passionately presenting to an executive here at LinkedIn about the fact that 50% of our manager and above hires were selecting internal talent. And at the time, I was convinced that a percentage that high meant that we had a huge barrier to diversifying our teams, because we wanted to go external and bring in more diverse talent. And he very quickly and adamantly disagreed with me. And I've totally come to see his point of view, because the transformation of that internal talent and our ability to grow a career at LinkedIn is such an important part of our employee value proposition. But the debate continues about internal hiring, because if you go internal too often, it really does jeopardize the potential to change representation on your team and improve the diversity of teams. And so how do you think of the trade-offs between those two things?
I don't look at it as trade-off. I look at it as a balance. You and Anastacia spoke very beautifully about the imperatives of diverse organizations. And I think, it's impossible to be successful if you're not diverse. It's impossible to be part of the larger society if you're not inclusive and representing the society you're part of. So I think there are no two thoughts about importance of diversity and continually trying to be better at being inclusive in every respect, right? Not just in terms of one aspect of diversity versus another. And at the same time, the importance of employee value proposition for our employees, the chances to grow, the ability to do more things is equally important. So it's a balance, right? It's a delicate balance at times, and hence the way we do it is we don't do a one-size-fits-all approach. We look at it team by team, we look at it by region by region, we look at organization by organization, or sometimes leader by leader, and kind of give them that first data, secondly, what possible solutions there are, and last but not the least, what could be the impact of their decisions over the next few years. For example, you spoke about the internship programs, right? How much of those greatly diverse internship programs result in better graduate diversity and hence better diversity of a particular team over the next 3 years? And it's not difficult to simulate these kind of numbers in today's time and with the tools available. Or if you start looking at the top, one of the questions keep coming is, let's hire the best person. Don't forget about diversity, right? And I think I kind of don't agree with that, right? Because that's constantly saying that the best talent is only of a particular type. If you haven't tried other talent or people from other backgrounds, how do you know they're not best? There goes the first tenet of diversity, that you have to have an open mind that everybody can do a great job in there, given the right opportunities and the tools and training and etc. And hence, recruiters have to be brave. Recruiters have to be courageous, and talent leaders have to back them up like really, really strongly to ask that question, that why not take that chance? And so it's like taking a partner to dance. Sometimes you have to lead, and sometimes you have to be led, right? And it's important that recruiters are ready to be led and recruiters are ready to lead at the same time. And that's the balance between mobility and diversity, which I constantly talk about.
I wanted to share another thought that I have is we talk all the time, and you'll hear managers say all the time, I just need to hire somebody that's going to hit the ground running. And that is often born out of, too much stress, too much pressure, too many competing initiatives for them. But the idea of hitting the ground running is so short-sighted. And so we've started really educating managers about, if you're looking for somebody to hit the ground running, then you're planning for talent for the next 6 months. We want you to be thinking of talent for the next 18 months to 2 years. And it does take a year to get great. Right. It takes a year to learn an organization, to understand how to navigate internally, and to understand how everything works in a specific organization. So if you're hitting the ground running, you aren't thinking big enough, and you're not thinking broad enough of how do we invest in a talent strategy going forward. So completely agree with you. The verbiage there of hitting the ground running, let's get rid of that. I think that's going to be really important as we have this.
I have my numbers to meet. It is the most common thing you would ever hear from people. Yeah, but completely agree with you.
Awesome. Well, I think that is time for this section. I think we could probably talk about this for hours, but I want to make sure that we have enough time for the Q&A that's coming in. And so let's bring Anastacia back to the screen and go to our first set of questions. So we'll take a bunch from the audience, and let's start with some conversation around diversity. And again, this is open to any of us to answer. So the first one is, if hiring managers are largely members of a historically dominant group, how do you prevent biases in recruitment and performance evaluations when you're not starting with a diverse committee at the table, so to speak? I see a lot of siloing of diverse talent at either the internship level or entry level, and then at the CEO level. So like VPs of diversity, et cetera. How do we make the middle more diverse when peers in this group all come from majority groups?
I think this is a tough one because it's not something that's going to change overnight. But starting with the education and starting with a conversation is a good start. Being able to sit down with some of those hiring managers, bring data showing, how many of these candidates have not moved forward or not been promoted or whatever the issue is, and I'm using the data to identify the issue, and then really having tough conversations and saying, look, we're missing these voices, we're missing this person, talk with me a little bit about this hiring decision or this hiring decision, and really opening it up, not accusing anybody, not giving blame to anybody, but making sure that there is that kind of safe space to be able to have some of those hard conversations. Again, show the data, give the training to start moving the needle and start making some changes. And I think Rajesh had a great comment about you don't know what you don't know, and keeping an open mind. And how do you not know that person is the greatest person that's fit for this role? And so being able to target some of those things and ask some of those things to identify and bring to light conversation starters to start to change that viewpoint.
Yeah, and I would add one important point is, we have to make the middle managers the champion of diversity and change, and hence carefully selecting out of this lot some people who will champion that cause or be the voice of reason. I think is important element to that whole entire change process.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, Erin. I think learning from each other too, where you have one group that's doing something really well, learn and share those best practices across different groups and across different organizations so that they can see from some of their peers where there have been successes.
And I'll get very tactical on that question, which is, one of the things that we noticed in our feedback when we were reading through feedback, a lot of it would talk about, we spent 20 minutes talking about how both of our kids played soccer. I mean, it was that bad. And they actually wrote it and captured feedback in some places. And so we started to do some video interviewing just as a pilot, no tools, nothing. But hey, we want everybody being asked the exact same same question. So we're going to take the 3 most important questions that you have for these candidates around competencies, not around actual, have they been in media sales, but around competencies related to sales. We're going to record the responses to those questions, and we're going to review them with you so we can actually level the playing field and make sure that everybody is having the exact same experience, whether you're from a majority group and your son plays soccer, or whether you're from a minority group and you have a daughter who doesn't. And so I think that leveling the playing field is so important with diversity, to just make sure we're asking the questions that matter and uncovering people's competencies and abilities and not commonalities, because it is so easy, and I am occasionally guilty of this, to spend too much time on the rapport building part of an interview as opposed to the assessment part, and really shining a light on that, I think, can be really, really helpful in overcoming that.
I completely agree with the core competencies, and that's something that we've done at CBS Interactive about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. That was rolled out, and so as we're coming together as this one TA team for ViacomCBS, we're discussing how can we ensure that we have those core competencies, and what are those questions, and what are the key details that get to the success of that person in that role. I think that's a really great point, Erin, and I think that it also allows you to dig in deeper and bring to light some of those potential biases and talk about them and move past them and have some of that awareness.
Well, another question, I think, looking for some tangible examples. So can we get examples of education and myth busting? All the ones I have seen, I feel bad for this person, but all the programs I've seen have been forced diversity hires, and that does not lead to sustainable change. And I can jump in to just kick off some thoughts here, and then would love to give you guys a couple seconds to think about responses. I think that the myth busting is showing, and it's not just the data, but it's actually the profiles of these amazingly talented individuals that happen to come from underrepresented groups. And so it is, I think that some organizations make this mistake of saying, as an act of activism and to meet a diversity quota, we will bring in these people. And I say, absolutely not. You bring in amazing, great talent that absolutely exists in the marketplace. And that is the key to this diversity initiative. You're not settling, you're not taking an intelligent risk, you're bringing in the right talent. So I think that is a way to educate and myth bust that the talent doesn't exist. And then the other tactical thing that we've done is we call it our hiring heroes. And this is general, not specific to diversity, but where are we winning? So that example that I gave of consistent interview questions and consistent interview scenarios, that's a hiring manager who was really interested in democratizing the approach to diversity. And so that person set the stage for other people to do the same, and now we're replicating that on other teams. I love that idea of finding people who are doing it well and who are overcoming bias in creative ways, and making sure that gets a spotlight, making sure that gets rewarded in newsletters and on main stage recognition. I think those tangible examples are like ways to educate and myth bust about what's possible when we really are intentional about hiring the right diverse talent.
Great examples, Erin. Thanks. And I'll add one. It's for the senior leaders to come out and talk about, sometimes even at a particular profile level, that why would you not reject this profile, or why would you give opportunity to a particular set of candidates? And I'll give you an example. We got in one of our large sales meetings, we got our president of sales to come and talk about how he would hire these individuals who have been rejected during the process, because if they are getting rejected, he himself would not have ever got a chance to work in the organization, because he had exactly the same background as these candidates had when he joined Infosys 20 years ago. And I think I think for the leaders to take that responsibility, that I am ready to take a chance on a candidate because I think they would do well, shows a lot of courage to middle managers, junior employees, to say, what, if the big boss is ready to is ready to lead the way, it's easier to follow, rather than being at my level and say, I would go out of the quote unquote the right talent, a right profile to hire somebody who does not fit the checklist. So getting some of the leaders to come and talk openly about at very tactical level, not just at very strategic or concept level, but actual activity level and say, it's okay to take this decision, it's okay to fail, and we will learn along the way is very important.
That leading by example, I think, is huge, and giving that safe space to really push the envelope, make a change, try something new, and accept the success or learn from a potential failure is really, really critical. I agree.
And the only thing I want to just be clear of, and I know what we all mean when we say this, I don't think it isn't a risk to hire underrepresented talent. It is a risk to hire talent from another industry. And so sometimes when we're going to a different industry, so if we're going to pharma to hire media salespeople, that is a risk. It is not inherently a risk to hire underrepresented talent. Just want to be clear there. On the talent development segment, we sometimes see compensation become a roadblock for reskilling and between offering internal versus external candidates. It's harder to get the internal candidate up to what the job would normally pay. What would be your suggestion to deal with that?
And it's a very living problem, very live problem in almost every single organization. And I think the importance, as I said earlier, is to work very closely with the HR organization to come up with solutions around it. In our organization, we did remove friction around how people can get promoted through the internal mobility route, and hence also get the right compensation associated with the roles. But it's not a straightforward decision to take in isolation within the talent organization. I think it's a larger conversation along with HR and the leadership to say how internal mobility is not looked at as a shortcut to success, if I may call it, right? It has to fit in really well with the larger talent management philosophy around career development, promotions, career movements, the whole gamut of it. And that's why it's important that we don't look at marketplace as very traditional external marketplace, and recruiters don't become, sometimes I call them very salesy recruiter just to get the position filled. It's important they wear their HR/talent hat to look at the internal talent slightly differently, and that's the nuance which we need to bring into our organizations in a measured way.
Anastacia, interested to hear, in California, there's a Fair Pay Act, which basically says you can't base somebody's future compensation on their existing or past compensation. Do you apply that internally as well?
So, we partner closely with our HR and comp teams, and they're the ones that really drive forward on those compensation practices. And of course, with the merger, we're all coming together and determining these things. But we take a close look at everything throughout. What is the external talent coming in? Who are the internals moving? We also have people, coming from different companies, and so we have that added challenge where we've had different comp and pay structures and bands and bonuses and all of that. And so there's a lot of different nuances that we're making sure that we're doing our very best to look at, but not using that as not letting that be a stop, but starting the conversation, saying, where can we be creative? How can we make this change? What needs to move and shift? So there's a lot of different nuances that are going into things on our side.
Great. So Rajesh, this one's specifically for you. So in a huge service organization like Infosys, how practical is it to map the internal talent pool trained in particular dynamic demand skills, given the fact that internal talent may not be available within the time frame? Like, what strategy should you follow there?
Great question, and it's not easy. Today, as a recruiter, when I go on LinkedIn, I have the ability to look at skills, availability, and various amount of data. And I think we have to have exactly similar concept for internal employees. And the good thing is, for internal employees, we have a lot more data than what a candidate puts on a job board or a social media platform. And hence, you already have a lot of data. It's your ability to mine that data to create those talent profiles. It's important. So there is a little bit of a tool play there. Secondly, in companies like ours specifically, skill is the single most important attribute for an individual employee. And hence, most of the employees do keep their skills updated. They're constantly learning, and hence adding to their CVs the latest skills learned and the kind of projects they do. So it's relatively easier for us to keep track of what skills people have. The availability of talent at a particular point in time is definitely a question. And there comes another point where the relieving managers are not always ready to release them. People can walk out of the company more easily than sometimes get released internally, and then that's again has been a good conversation, that how do you provide both sets, the hiring manager as well as the releasing manager, that comfort that none of your projects are being put at risk or at it's one is not important over the other. Both are equally important, and hence there would be we build the same notices internally as we would give the external candidates. And some markets those notices could be very less, like in the US, and some markets contractual notice periods are up to 3 months. So we kind of honor those notices as we would honor it for external candidates internally also, so that everybody feels at comfort that this is not for me or against me. This is for the betterment of the employees and the betterment of the organization. So that's the approach we take on both capturing skills as well as how do we give comfort on releasing and availability of talent.
It's so interesting to think about how management consulting practices have no choice but to codify skills and to understand what skills base. I think in a more traditional corporate setting, that has to be culturally embedded, so that employees see the importance and the value proposition of them continuing to update their skills. And you've gotten me thinking of how do we create that same culture where an employee self-drives some of that skill highlighting on their profiles, and then get the tools, obviously, to be able to search there. It's really interesting.
Maybe you should develop a LinkedIn for corporates, right? Internal usage LinkedIn.
We do get to be customer zero here at LinkedIn, so we do get to give feedback to the product team, and it's the one thing that I think I ask for the most. There's a few questions that we haven't gotten to. I'm trying to think of something look for a question that is fairly easy and quick, because we're almost at time. So 2 things on tools. So specifically, what tools do you use, Rajesh, on Internal Talent Marketplace? And Anastacia, to you, any partners specifically that you recommend that folks might want to check out for diversity?
So for the Internal Talent Marketplace, we have a homegrown in-house tool which we've developed last year, and it sits on our ATS and it sits on our HRIS, etc. But it's built for purpose. So we are a technology company at the end of it, so we could build a tool faster than what could serve us from the external market. Happy to share it if somebody wants to reach out and see the tool or how it works.
Great. And Anastacia, on D&I partners?
Yeah, so we have a ton of them across the board. A lot of what we're focused on is tech and product hiring. So most of our diversity partners are within that space. So we partner a lot with Society of Women Engineers. We've just kind of launched a partnership with Girls Who Code. We have a few partnerships with folks where we promise and guarantee internships with Student Rising Above and Hidden Genius Project, and that kind of spans all functions. But I think really the thing is to be able to just go out and talk to different partners. You never know who is going to fit for your organization, and then piloting programs and seeing what they can offer and how one varies from another to make sure that it's complementary to what your organization needs. So.
Great. I'll give a plug to Year Up, Jopwell, and MLT have been great for partners for us.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, well, that is about all of the time that we have for questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this discussion today, and obviously special thanks to our guests, Rajesh, Anastacia, and Virtual Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yep.
So to the audience, don't forget to download your copy of the Future of Recruiting report for even more insights on how COVID-19 is transforming hiring. And thank you to everyone for joining us, and we will definitely see you next time.